94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online at kpfa.org. Up next, Women's Magazine.
Feminist women.
Mulheres feministas.
زنان فمینیست.
Vanyu Vachikonzero Chevakazi.
نساء.
Mujeres feministas.
Yam femini. Femactivist.
Nari Mukti.
Matapang na babae. Kechimai ka ishk.
Welcome to Women's Magazine, everyone. My name is Margo Okazawa-Rey. I am one of your co-hosts today, and I have with me Women Magazine Collective member Jovelyn Richard. We have a pretty exciting program, we think. So that's one thing I want to start with, but also reminding you that this is our summer fundraiser. And so we will be counting on you listeners to contribute what you can. I know these are not easy times. Prices are going up, everything. And we hope that you can find somewhere in your purse a few dollars to donate to Women's Magazine specifically and KPFA generally. And you know as well as Jovelyn and I do that independent media are so essential, not just for correct news and good analysis and possibilities of what we're trying to create, right? But also to maintain our sanity. And so that's what we're hoping to do this evening, or this afternoon, I should say, on Women's Magazine. Jovelyn and I will be having a conversation about Black feminism. And what we're hoping to do is not just discuss the theories of Black feminisms and so forth, but ask you to think about what does Black feminism mean to you, whatever race, gender, ethnicity, whatever your background is. What does it mean to you? What has it meant to you historically, if you have been around for a while? And what do you think are its possibilities? And what might be the weaknesses, shall we say, the limitations. So stay tuned for a pretty exciting show. And Jovelyn Richards, welcome. I'm so glad we get to co-host this fundraiser show and a conversation we've been wanting to have for a couple of years now.
Absolutely, and I'm glad to be here with you. This is I went to sleep thinking about this conversation. I woke up thinking about this conversation, and it's been a constant, like you said, for 2 years, because I did not claim the word feminist and some of the listeners may have heard this story before, when we've been on together with Velma, that I didn't start to embrace the word until you began to talk about that sometimes we think about feminists from the Americans' perspective, which that movement was led not by women of color, but in ways in which I think the books and anthology on the backs of women of color. And so that resistance for me was lived there. But then when you opened up the story and you talked about it from a global perspective, and you shared in that conversation, which I was very resistant in that conversation. I was ready to do battle and not wanting to hold that word, feminist. And when you shared that there were places all over the world throughout human time where women without access, without means, was fighting for the rights of women, and that they didn't have the things that we have in America to be able, like the newspapers, magazines, radio, TV, the accolades that went with being a part of the feminist movement. And that's when I started thinking of others and getting myself out the way and began to accept that. But even now, I still have questions. So that's the history. So that's why I'm happy that you agreed that we can have this conversation, and it's not a one-time conversation, but that it'd be a continuous conversation. We're thinking once a month. to have this with open phone lines to others who may be either where you're at with deep roots in the feminist movement, or where I'm at, who is just now moving the soul to see.
Thank you, Jovelyn, for having been so open. I know we were ready to go to fisticuffs, as the old folks would say,
Yeah.
on this issue. And I want no listeners to leave this program today continuing to think, if you think this already, continuing to think that feminism is a white woman thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's my goal for today, that whoever thinks that, whoever's holding that somewhere, that you would, after this program, let it go and at least put it aside and rethink other ways to understand Black feminisms. And I want to put it as a plural. It's not just one strand of feminism that's Black, right? It's not just one group of feminists, Black feminists, but there are whole strands, perspectives, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Before we get going with the conversation, I know, Jovelyn, you have some questions for me. I
Yes.
want to remind folks that this is a fundraiser show. So please, call us or find us on the web. Call us at 1-800-HEY-KPFA or on the web www.kpfa.org and donate
And
whatever you
also this,
can.
and this is our summer fund drive, and we are hoping that this will end quicker than it was intended to, because we want to give out a big thanks to our KPF Guardians who and other folks who started subscribing early or donating before the summer drive that is committed to KPFA. So we want to thank everyone already. And then also to, again, 1-800-439-5732. And the goal is to raise, I think our goal is 150,000, and we know that we can do that with our community listeners and the support, because you are our guardians, and that's a part of what it is. And we also, just so you know, to be thinking about it, what we have today, one of the things is a whistle, KPFA Red Whistle, and it's $25 donation, and that's to use some noise when ICE is involved in the story. We have a lot of beautiful T-shirts and hoodies and sweatshirts you can pick up that has a lot of the wonderful slogans. You can go to the website to look at all those. They're beautiful in color and in story to support it. And so your donations will help. And if you're inside this conversation right now, listening to Margo and myself, definitely donate during this hour, right? Because now we're unpacking the story of what a feminist is, and opening that up, and the resistance and those who hold deeply to it. And so if you're saying to yourself, oh, okay, I want to hear this conversation because I land somewhere on this story. Again, it's a tight time for all of us. Throw something in the pot. Donate and understand that Women's Magazine, we are here for you, our listeners. And in the future, when we have these conversations around this subject matter, we're going to be opening lines because we want you to join us. So there you have it. So donate again, 1-800-439-5732, or go to kpfa.org and look at all the wonderful things we have in terms of the T-shirts, the sweaties, the hoodies, whatever is there with these beautiful sayings on printed on front. And again, the whistle, the red whistle, which is $25, and make some noise when you see ice. So here we go.
All right, then here we go. Thank you, Jovelyn, for that wonderful pitch. So I want to start with just a little story about myself. Some of you may know, maybe not, that I was one of the founding members of the Combahee River Collective back in the mid-70s. And it's interesting how Black feminism and Black feminist thought often starts from that very ubiquitous statement, the Combahee River Collective statement, right? And so I've heard scholars, activists from other parts of the world wanting to know about what the collective was, what the statement, meant, what was my experience, those kinds of things. And what I want you to do is really reach farther back, right? That Black feminism started long before the Combahee River Collective, and Black feminism started long before the ways that Black women in the US were recognized. So I want to just really push this question. Where do you start the story of Black feminism? Right. So I'll come back to that. Jovelyn, give me your best question right now.
Well, now, I'll give you the question that I'm interested in you unpacking for myself and the audience. But I'm somewhere in the questions, I think one of the best may rise in our time together. So I heard something recently, I read something recently regarding Bell Hooks, and one of the things that she was quoted as saying is that I came to theory desperate, wanting to comprehend, to grasp what was happening around and within me. I saw in theory a location for healing. What is your definition of theory, and how does Black feminist theory, as you're going to define it, I want to find the places in which we can speak to all of us who are looking for places to also heal. And do you see Black feminists as a way to heal?
So thank you for starting with that quote, because I absolutely resonate with Bell Hooks's idea of theory is basically an explanation. It's an explanation about our lives, a people's explanation, just ordinary common people's explanation of why something is the way it is, and in this case, why Black women in the US have experienced a certain kinds of oppressions, discrimination, and also certain kinds of privilege, which we don't really look at that much, right? And we'll get to that as well. So absolutely, a theory with a lowercase t is basically an explanation, and I think the most powerful theories are when people who are affected by a phenomenon, right, whether they're in a dominant position or subordinated position, when they're affected by a phenomenon, that they come together and explain to themselves, hey, what's going on here? Why is it that we, as Black women in California, let's say, or in Ohio, wherever we are, consistently experience certain kinds of things? You know, for example, violence in our families, the discrimination on the streets or in the workplace, um, you know, forgetting about our ancestors, right? How do we come to understand that? And in the old days, we used to call it consciousness raising, right? But
Yeah,
now I think about it as theorizing, right? We were raising our consciousness through explaining what was happening in our lives. You know, why is it? Is it just because, as we're told, because we're lazy, or we're the strong Black woman, all the stereotypes that we know about? Or
right.
is there something else going on, right? And so, for example, Jovelyn, tell me your story of growing up in wherever you grew up, and I'll tell you my story, right? And this is how we, theorize. This is how we explained beyond just our individual experiences, but how we put our experiences together. And just talking about experience isn't enough. That's a first step. But then we say, well, why is that? What does schooling have to do with it? What does structural inequalities, why is it that certain people consistently get to start beyond the start place, and some people start behind the start place, the starting line? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I appreciate hearing that, as you say, back in the day, something similar to that, that it was conscious raising, and then now it's become theory raising. So the thing that struck me is whether or not in present time it's important to bring back conscious raising,
Yes.
because I am aware of witnessing out in and outside myself a certain collective unconsciousness that seems to be prevalent in the here and now in order for unconscionable acts to happen.
Right.
And
Right.
so how do we begin to be conscious?
Well, back in the day, as I said, we called it consciousness raising.
Yeah,
Now I think about it as popular education. You know, how people get together and teach ourselves. And
yeah,
we use, of course, certain kinds of texts. Like, for example, the Combahee River Collective Statement is a great text. There are other texts. We can use poems or poetry. We can use music, and we can do theater, as you do, Jovelyn, and
yeah,
performance,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That there's so many texts that we can use in addition to our own lives, right? To educate ourselves. And now, not just raise our consciousness, not become more enlightened or
yeah,
become more aware, but actually, through becoming aware, be become courageous enough to take a leap, especially in this time when all bets are off, right? And we seem to be completely inundated and kind of pushed under, right? Especially in this moment. The kind of education, popular education that I'm talking about, the kinds of conversations groups of us can have, I
yeah,
think can give us the courage, because I think part of being courageous is saying, okay, we've been hurt, right? And there's more to us than the hurt we've experienced or the oppression we've experienced, right? And so collectively, we can muster up the courage to say, okay, let's collectively take a leap into the unknown, right? And as we're leaping, also create, where we want to land.
Eh, So I like the fact that you said that there's so many different ways to raise consciousness, which moves me into the thoughts of digital spaces, social media, and global activism. And how so you're seeing that as a way also that shapes Black feminist discourse and
Mhm.
feminist discourse, period.
Yes, there are various ways to do it.
Yeah,
Before we start talking about though,
yeah,
I think something that I really want us to think about is, kind of the dominant perspective of Black and Black feminism. The Black in Black feminism has typically implied or suggested or actually directly said Black means, right? People in the U.S., descendants of enslaved African people. Right? That's the real Black, in quotes. Okay. And what I'm saying is that Black folks are almost in every corner of the planet.
yeah,
Right? There are Black folks in Gaza, for example. Right? There are Black folks in the Philippines. So it's not just the Black folks, descendants of enslaved African people that we need to center, but I think it is Blackness,
yeah,
right, in the various ways it manifests in different locations, Germany, of course, the continent, and other locations, right? But
yeah.
to understand Blackness in context, I think it's really, really important, so that, as usual, we're not putting in the center, the US understandings. Because
Yeah,
if you travel around different parts of the world, you see how dominant US thinking is, and I'm frustrated by that.
because
Because, for example, people in Europe using the concept BIPOC. Huh? To me,
Okay.
BIPOC doesn't even really make sense here. That's a whole nother conversation. But it certainly doesn't make sense in Germany, for example, or in France,
Yes, 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 yes.
because that term comes out of a particular historic moment, right, to explain certain things about particular groups of people. And
Mhm.
in a way, it sort of also kind of creates a hierarchy. Black, indigenous, people of color, right? It may sound nice, but if you dissect that, you can see a hierarchy, and we want to move away from hierarchies.
I agree. And then also too, hearing that and knowing that America helped shape the global thought patterns based on here. So that
Mhm.
leadership, so when I hear that America for whatever amount of time has been the leadership on a global level, then it also our thinking, our way of life, the things we put out there, because as I'm hearing you say, is embraced by other parts of the world. And so so we need to be responsible, knowing that someone is overhearing. And I think it makes it even more urgent for feminists, Black feminists, people to be able to be very mindful and conscious of how we move in our lives and in each other's lives, because we know the impact that others have and how we can support not only America at this time in history by interconnect with one another, understanding, like you said, tell our stories to one another. And that doesn't mean just individually, but different community stories that are being told historically and have been, to listen to those stories, hear the voices of the people within that story, and begin to move accordingly for in my thinking, the betterment of humanity. And then also knowing others are listening for formulas in which their own lives can be moving towards humanity and not war, not pain, not separation. Because so
Mhm.
many movements in other places throughout history have been informed by the civil rights. South Africa has said repeatedly they had found some of their courage in the movement, in the civil rights movement, and other things we've done here has given others the courage to look at their own freedom in a way that felt accessible.
Mhm.
And so
Well,
to be
see,
mindful,
and yeah,
yeah,
and what we haven't had, and I agree with what you're saying for us to be mindful. What we haven't had, and we have to understand the nature of the power, the
yeah.
structural inequalities, the global structural inequalities, the power of the US Academy, the US media, etc., to really understand how do the theories created here go other places, and why don't the theories from other places come our direction?
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's a whole African feminist forum. There's a whole group of Asian feminists. Why don't we in the US hear about their theories, hear about their movements?
And you're thinking that's because of the media itself, or is part of that too, is that we in America have so invested in our opinion not only matters, but is the only opinion, and in leadership of feminist thought or any thought.
Well, I think when you're in a dominant position, sometimes you don't even think about those things, right?
Yeah.
Because the power you are exercising is you're like the fish in water. You're just swimming in it. You don't necessarily become conscious that, oh, oops, here we are. We're only hearing about our own kinds of theories and not hearing from, Afro-French women or Afro-German women or women from Nigeria, women from South Africa, feminists who are talking about these things, right?
So,
It's almost like we have our own echo chamber, right?
yeah.
And when you're in a dominant position, we don't really have to look at anything except ourselves. And that includes us as Black feminists in the US.
Yes. And as we are unpacking this here in real time for you, my questions, Margo's thoughts and questions, and I want you to know that this is Women's Magazine and donate to this. And if you're appreciating the conversation, if it's bringing up questions in you, and if you're resisting the conversation, if you think this is hucklepuck or whatever that word is, from my Midwestern upbringing, hucklepuck, right? And so whatever your feelings or thoughts around it, donate. Remember, this is a fundraiser. We're hoping a summer fundraiser. We're hoping to end it soon. You can go to the website. As I mentioned earlier, there's so many things that you can order. Some of the hoodies, KPFA unisex t-shirts, they're $50. Law and Disorder hoodie, that's $50. KPFA hoodies, $50, both zippered and pull over. Storytelling for Social Change, tote, that's okay. That's gonna be one I'm gonna get. KPFA socks, $50. Can you imagine sitting in a coffee
Can you
shop and
imagine? I
right,
know
someone
you take
cross their
off your
legs,
shoes,
right?
right?
Somebody
And you
cross their
see,
legs or do something or whether they're wearing pants or not, and all of a sudden you see KPFAs and it's like, oh, you got on some KPFA socks, and I do too. This is
and you'll be the talk of the town,
a
not to
talk of the
mention
town.
you
And
will
and
remind people about,
exactly. So
yeah.
800-439-5732 or kpfa.org. And particularly, yes, do donate during this hour. And here's the thing, and this is a personal thing for me. Even after being a part of KPFA for almost 20 years, and then I have found that I am still trying to understand my voice in this story.
Mhm.
And in finding my voice, there's a part of the responsibility to you, the listener. So I think to myself, well, you're not just talking to yourself, which I do enjoy talking to myself, but this is a whole different thing. This is a whole nother talk show. I am constantly trying to, being a radio host producer with uh, um, KPFA, knowing, having a sense of our listeners and how engaged and how involved, and knowing that there's a part of them that is fearless in their own way and that they support the station, they choose to be, is constantly pushing me to know myself and so I come up with ways in which to do that. And so I appreciate when you support the Women's Magazine, KPFA, because it tells me another story. It says
Mhm.
that you're getting something right on Women's Magazine. You're getting something very right with KPFA. You're saving lives on both fronts. You're standing up in challenging times for democracy, and we're not owned by billionaires. And there's no word named ownership. It's
Right.
community. So we're in relationship with community, with you, the listener. So do go 1-800-439-5732, kpfa.org. And if you've heard me mention one of the t-shirts or hoodies that you want, and you want the red whistle for $25 in case you see anything happen with ICE, you can blow the KPFA whistle to let your community of people know, be safe, run safe. And that's
Thank
important.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
that's an important reminder. And before we break for station ID, I just also want to clarify a couple of points. One
Okay.
is among Black feminists, there are the similar kinds of strands of Black feminism. So, for example, there are liberal Black feminists think the Black feminism is about access, right? Just like the white women early on thought about the mainstream white women's movement thought about access, equal employment, same as the integrationist movement in our own Black American history, right? Then there are the more radical versions of Black feminisms. So, for example, there are Black socialist feminists, there are Black Marxist feminists, right? That who really are pushing not just individual integration into existing systems, economic, social, political systems, right? But are really pushing for radical restructuring, not just within the US, but across the borders, right? So that really understanding that for Black women to be free, as the Combahee River Collective said, right? All the institutions would have to change, right? All the institutions would have to change. That would mean not just the social institutions, but economic, political, so forth, and capitalist structures and imperialist structures also, right? And so that those strands are really important to recognize within Black feminism, right? In the US, and certainly in Black feminist thinking outside the US, in the Caribbean, on the continent, and different parts of the continent, in Europe, and in other parts of the world. So let's take a break here, Jovelyn.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to Women's Magazine. I am Margo Okazawa-Rey, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Jovelyn Richards, talking about Black feminist thought and its relevance in this particular historic moment. You're listening to KPFA Radio, 94.1 FM on your dial, or on the web, www.kpfa.org. And we'll be right back after this break, and you'll get to hear Judy Mowat singing about Black women.
Black woman, black woman, like me, you struggled long. You trod one of life's roughest roads and hit the heaviest load. To be someone to belong, but you're nearing your mile and a half furlong. Don't give up now, just pray for strength now. For you I dedicate my song. La da 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 da.
Welcome back to Women's Magazine, conversation with Jovelyn Richards and myself, Margo Okazawa-Rey, talking about the relevance of Black feminisms in this historic moment, and even asking the question, what does it mean? What is it? What kind of theory is it? Before we continue the conversation, though, please let us remind you that this is our Summer Fund Drive, and we want your support. You can become a member, or you can donate in whatever amount you want. And as Jovelyn said earlier, we have lots of goodies to offer you. Jovelyn talked about the whistle for the ice, hoodies, t-shirts, all kinds of things. So, you know, a lot of times we take wonderful things like KPFA, and if we have to say so ourselves, a women's magazine radio program, for granted. And as we know, these days, nothing can be taken for granted. And certainly not a gem like KPFA radio and Women's Magazine. We're one of the few feminist radio programs in the country. And so we like to think that we're making a contribution that is worth something, is worth your attention, you're listening to us, worth you opening your wallet, pulling out your pockets and donating whatever you can. And for that, we have lots of good stuff to give you. So shall we continue, Jovelyn?
Yes, we should. And I want to move into one of my fun places that I live in, born into, and that's imagination and creativity, which you mentioned early on. And So the question I have for you, so this might be the favorite, my best favorite question, because again, I'm made up of that. At least I'd like to believe, and sometimes I wonder, am I holding on to it, to my imagination? And the question is, what role does imagination play in Black feminist futures? Before you answer, I want to say this, because I wonder in my own self sometimes whether or not, with all that we're dealing with, what has that done to the imagination? Because imagination to me means moving evolution forward, going to the edge of nowhere and seeing a path ahead where no one else can. And I wonder what has happened to us in our brains being so distorted with so much that does not even begin to look like humanity, right? So
Right.
what role does imagination play in Black feminist futures so that we can have ways in which to think about fighting for our imagination?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And Jovelyn, I'm going to turn it back on you
Yeah,
because you are the artist
yeah,
here.
yeah,
You are the creative
yes,
in a very literal sense,
yes, yeah.
right? And so, how have you developed your imagination as, I would just say, in a very loving and
Yeah,
humorous way,
yeah,
as a budding Black feminist, right?
yeah.
What role has imagination played in you developing your feminism?
So what I had to imagine, what I do imagine to even is where I was always in my life under the umbrella of feminist. So I had to go back and think about my life as a woman, the things I chose to do, which was working in communities that were most challenged, vulnerable. That would be Milwaukee, Minnesota, California, twice, Seattle, the South. And in those choices, while raising family, I chose to work in communities that of the domestic violence, homeless, addiction, and many times all of those, and most of the times played together. And so in my imagination, when I thought back, I thought, I chose, like I couldn't imagine anywhere else to be, but to be sitting next to, and I'm just thinking of people that I have worked with and served, sitting next to a woman who, at that time, I'm in California, San Mateo, Pacifically living, and a woman, Japanese woman, had escaped her abuser and taken on a position as a seamstress, and under that space was not being treated fairly, but taken advantage of. And we were sitting there talking, and I'm listening to her unpack the story and the vulnerability even after escaping, and realizing how much her story, her children, my life was opening. So in that, by the time I recognized that I am a storyteller, and I remember promising women that when I was leaving my last position that had gotten the funding was gone, and they said, Miss Jovelyn, don't leave. So this is a accumulation of all the years I spent inside of the communities I just shared. When they said, Miss Jovelyn, don't leave, my instinct said immediately to them, I will never leave you, but I will take your stories to the stage. Not your Pacific stories, not your name, not the place, not any of the above, but I would take the stories and what you have offered. And that was your continuation to be willing to love, to feel, to fight, to believe, that freedom from abuse or addiction or homelessness was yours, that it wasn't on a wish list, it was yours. And that under the circumstances of your lives, the one thing at the forefront, the stories you first told started with my children, my children, my children. And so that would be my answer, even if it seems a little, off-centered, or somebody says, well, that wasn't I was expecting, or whatever it is. But that's the thing that comes up when I hear when you say that. What role does my imagination play? So when I walk on stage, I'm known as an improvisational solo artist, which means I create a frame. I create the characters, and those characters embody all the hundreds of stories of women and children who at the forefront of their consciousness, or the mothers and fathers, my children. And at the forefront of the consciousness of the children was my mama or my daddy, right? Because they saw the stories of addiction, of abuse, of homelessness, and the kids wanted more for their mommies or daddies. So those characters in my imagination, they embody something of what those stories told me: hope, laughter, the sweetness of caring, the sweetness of what it is to care. That it's so profound to me. And it told me that I was just in LA doing a show, and I remember saying to the audience that in the places where we least expected, in the places that are so broken, that is filled with handprints of desperation, you will find evidence of love, not in a Hallmark card, not inside of a commercial, not in a bouquet of flowers, but if you look at those handprints, you will see the tiniest handprint that is speaking of love. Like, how can a 3-year-old have so much affection and say, my mama, she's, and you could hear, right? And that's, but thank you for that question. I've worked
So what I'm taking, Jovelyn, from what you said, I think is really an important part of imagination, is that imagination is, for me, always in context, right? And it's in relation to other folks, right? And for me, imagination emanates through listening to other people's stories, through observing life around me, my own life, looking beyond my own sphere, right? Listening and looking, then imagination to me is almost a reaction, or it's generated. It's not like A causes B, but through listening and observing, then we're inspired. We are what's the word? Stimulated, right? To think beyond the obvious.
Yeah.
You know, that Japanese woman whose story you were listening to, right? She was telling you a lot of things. It made you think about something else because you really heard what she was saying.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes. And one of the reasons why it was important for me to say Japanese woman, because it was so important for when she was telling me her story, she was telling me of the kind of bias she was experiencing while she was trying to save the lives of herself and her children, and how the shop she was being a seamstress, she knew that that was a part of how they saw her, and how they felt they could take advantage of her desperation and the
And
biases, the
we've
cultural
been we've
bias.
been we've been told certain things about Asian/Japanese women,
Yeah.
right? And so in that exchange, it pushed you to rethink your own stereotypes, perhaps, or your own assumptions about who Asian, in this case, Japanese women are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. And so that's part of the context, the inspiration, the that the catalyst that helps us imagine other possibilities besides what's right in front of us or what's happened in the past,
And
right?
you also said earlier, which is I'm experiencing this physically in just going over back in memory and how it inspired my imagination so that I move on stages, whether it's doing stand-up comedy or sport theater, that when you said earlier, raising consciousness was about telling each other stories. And so all the hundreds of stories that gathered inside of me raised my spiritual consciousness, my emotional consciousness, and part of my story on stage. It's not about, oh, here is my goal. It's about, this is I write for this human consciousness, human evolution, to stretch our emotional landscape, right? And I remember when I had left the stage in March in LA, there was a woman who was hosting and she walked on stage and I had gotten off stage. My work was done. And I heard her say to the audience, my spirit was lifted. So
Mm, mm,
therefore, my work, all the hundreds of stories that came to me through the work I did, their work that they gave me was done. And so you're right, it's telling each other's story raises our consciousness, our emotional landscape, and broadens that. Again, a reminder, because I got caught up in my world of storytelling, and sometimes it carries me away, but Margo helps anchor me sometimes. Margo has a lot of patience with me because I go off in my emotional stuff that's beyond the radio when we talk to one another. And she just has a way of being able to dance with that, to dance within what I'm doing, and then to also bring a place when I'm landing that it becomes a soft landing. If you're enjoying this conversation, if you enjoy KPFA, go to the phone lines. We have like about 13 minutes, a little less than that in radio time, 1-800-439-5732. We know we're going to reach our goal, and our goal is to end the Summer Fund Drive a little bit earlier. Get those socks. KPFA socks. Get that whistle. And if you're a
yeah.
storyteller like me, get the one that says storyteller for social change tote bag. That's $50. Or a t-shirt, storyteller for social change for $50. Law and disorder hoodie if you could appreciate that. But we have a lot of wonderful gifts that you can get that also support you. And when you move around in public, I know that every time that I've been in public and I've seen a KPFA sticker, I knew that I was in traffic. I knew that I was a little bit safer on the roads.
Mhm,
So it does
mhm.
have meaning.
Right. Wear those KPFA socks when you're
Yes.
bicycling. And just to build on that, um, you know, this is a critical moment in history. There's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Evidence is everywhere. Evidence pops up, almost it seems like every other minute. I'm
Yeah.
exaggerating here, but you get the point, right?
Yeah.
So this summer, we really want you to, as we say here at KPFA, cast your vote for media that answers to people, not
Yeah.
corporations. Right? For media that answers to people, not corporations. And as producers of Women's Magazine, we have a lot of leeway in what we can produce, the kinds of perspectives we can bring in to our respective programs. I'm also invoking Lisa Detmer and Vilma Ortiz here as part of the four of us who have held down this program for the last few years.
Yes.
And, it's if you go through our list of programs, you'll see that we've gone from y- local Oakland, all the way to Sudan and to Korea and to Pacific, right? We've gone to Hawaii, we've gone all over the place with our programs to expose you to support what you already understand, deepen your understanding about feminist issues. That's what KPFA does best, right? And that's what we think Women's Magazine does very well, right? Bring you perspectives that you don't necessarily hear in other places. And you don't hear people like Jovelyn and me talking
Mhm.
about Black feminism on public radio in the ways we are now. We're having fun and we're having a serious conversation. That's
Absolutely.
KPFA, isn't it, Jovelyn?
It's absolutely KPFA, and it certainly is Women's Magazine. And a part of it for me with Women's Magazine is that I am surrounded by wonderful women with different insights and perspectives and depths of understanding with different backgrounds and inside of that story, this interconnectedness that we share and struggle with, and all of the elements that we all do as people, right? And for me, it's a gift to be a part of the story and an appreciative gift because I have a chance to learn. And one of the things I brought the space between us for those of you who watch every third Monday is the space between women, the things that separate us, the things that bind us together, that bring us together so that we can have a stronger foundation. And this is what this program is about right now. Like Margot's have spent parts of her years teaching in an academic setting, a course that I would have gladly have ran into. And now she happens to be a friend and a colleague of mine here on KPFA. And when I asked her, I want to talk on air and I want to bring whatever thimble of knowledge I have, because I know there's so many others out there that don't have a real handle on Black feminism or feminist period. And
Mhm.
that at this particular time in history, to have these discussions so we can find how being a feminist supports us in this time in history, and what are those theories and practices, and what could it look like, and what could it have long reaching for decades to come, right?
Mhm.
For other women's
Right,
lives, for the planet. And so
right.
that's the importance for me and the what this means to me for us to have this conversation and thinking
Mhm.
about futures, Margot. Are there things that you have noticed that were questions that are being asked now in real time that may not have been present uh 20 years ago, like or when you were actively teaching feminist study, whatever the titles of the courses were? Or is there questions emerging that you find fascinating and something you'd want to get your mind tangled up into to understand more intimately?
Well, what I'm not obsessing, but close to it, really thinking about is how can Black feminists in the US become truly transnational, become meaningful, humble members of a transnational feminist movement? That's what I've been thinking a lot about.
Yeah,
And what like what would that look like,
yeah,
right? And where would we meet? And you mentioned earlier about Zoom and all kinds of ways that folks can get together. But
yeah,
also there's another piece to it,
yeah,
and that is what languages must we speak so that if we're claiming a transnational feminism that includes Black feminists, right? What languages must we speak? And I don't mean just like uh, social linguistics like French, um, German, all the languages that are considered national languages, right? But I'm also thinking about how do we talk in ways that are not full of jargon, whatever language you speak, right, that are full of jargon, that what words will help us convey the essential aspects of our theories and our ideas in such a way that it can be understood, right, through collective digging into ideas, right, so that we're not just using language as shorthand,
Mm,
jargon as
mm,
shorthand, and assuming that everybody understands what's some word,
mm,
intersectionality, for example, right?
mm,
But how do we talk about these issues that matter to us in multiple languages? That is, of course, all the African and European languages, um, Asian languages that are spoken, but also even within those, getting away from academic language or
mm,
only activist language, like this. So going back to this idea of imagination, right? We can imagine something, but we also need to have ways to talk about them, to
mm.
express them. And this is where art comes in. This
Yeah,
is where music comes in. This is where
yes,
poetry comes in. So
yeah,
it's not just the usual, la 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 explanation, but there's so many ways to explain something through the arts
yeah,
and through silence and meditation, I would
yes.
argue.
Oh my gosh. Margo, I am so in love with your thinking right now. I am so in love with your to do. I am so in love with your passion. I am so in love with your continuation of beauty on this planet. And because I feel before things hit my brain, it hits my body. And as you began to say, how can Black American feminists be part of a transnational movement? My whole body was filled up with joy. Like I'm hungry, hunger, emotional hunger. And hearing you say, not with jargon, not with academic slogans or etc., but with a truth of accessibility of art and meditation and singing and talking, like like this is the world
Okay,
that I want.
Jovelyn, we're almost out of time. We got to give our last
You
pitch here.
to be continued.
Dear listeners, stay tuned for part two. But for now, immediately pick up your phone, get on your laptop, your iPhone, whatever, and make a donation.
Make a donation.
Become a member of KPFA. Whatever you donate will help us go a long way toward keeping our station independent, bringing you the news, the perspectives we want to bring you. And the more you donate, the more quickly we can end the summer fund drive, which we are right in the beginning stages of. So please pick up the phone 1-800-HEY-KPFA or www.kpfa.org/donate. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Jovelyn. To be continued.
To be continued. Thanks,
Again,
Ryan, our
please
engineer.
donate. Pick
زنان
up the
فمینیست
phone,
Banyu
click on
vachikondero
your
chivakazi.
laptop or iPhone,
Mujeres
make that
feministas.
donation.
Femativist.
Nari Mukti.
Matapang na babae. Kechimain ka ishk.
Nia Imani Kujajakalia.
Transitions on Traditions, a soul sonic rhapsody of words, sound, and power, where yesterday meets today and reaches towards tomorrow. I'm Greg Bridges, your host every Monday night from 8 to 10. Join me as we explore all that comes under the umbrella called jazz. From Lester Young to Lester Bowie, from Coleman Hawkins to Ornette Coleman, from Langston Hughes to Nikki Giovanni and beyond. Transitions on Traditions, Mondays 8 to 10 p.m. on listener-sponsored radio, KPFA.
You are listening to 94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online at kpfa.org.